If there ever was a time that I'm going to try to hit a home run, it's sure going to be today. For you boys.
That's great.
How does a kid from Emory Street in Baltimore manage to be the toast of Broadway?
He played years and years and years ago, but his name today is just as big as it was back then.
When he came out on the field, it was like the star came onto the center stage.
I'll tell you right now, 1,000 years from now, they'll still talk about Babe Ruth.
They call him the Sultan of SWAT because for so many years he was the king of the home run. But in truth, Babe Ruth was even bigger than that. He was bigger than life. Hi, I'm John Sterling for the Yes Network, and this is Yankeeography. When you talk about Yankees history, or for that matter, baseball history, no name resonates louder than that of Babe Ruth. He is, in many ways, the genesis of the most successful franchise in sports history. Few would debate his importance to the team, the tradition, and the game itself.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Bambino, Babe Ruth.
Every time you mention baseball, it's Babe Ruth.
He was the most tremendous player this game ever had.
There it is, the greatest home run hitter of all time. Babe Ruth was a magical name.
He went up to take batting practice. Nobody looked at anything else but Babe swinging that bat.
I heard the crack of that bat, and I'd never heard that sound before. I wanted to see who was hitting with the prettiest swing I'd ever seen, and that was Babe Ruth hitting that ball.
There was a special excitement about the fact that it was him. It wasn't just a home run, it was a Babe Ruth home run.
Fans would come out to see Babe, and if he struck out, they were tickled to death. If he hit a home run, they were happy. So here's a man, whatever he did, they were happy.
An entire nation loved him, and its youngsters made him their personal idol.
Even probably a youngster, when they first start to get interested in baseball, one of the first names they will ever hear is a person that's been dead for 50 or 60, 70 years. The magic name in baseball history is Babe Ruth. It has to be Babe Ruth.
He had one of the sweetest swings in the game, certainly one of the most powerful. But in truth, Babe's real power was his power over the people. For not only did children adore him, the most famous of men were humbled in his presence.
I have a ball autographed by Babe Ruth. Wish I'd have taken a picture with him, but those days were.
Babe Ruth, baseball's hero of heroes.
He was the hero, Babe Ruth, and came to Yale University in 1948, and I was the captain of the Yale Ball Club, so it was a very special moment, because as a little kid, I'd gone to Yankee Stadium and seen him park many of them right out of the ballpark.
Babe never disappointed. He dominated the game like no one ever will dominate the game. And then off the field, he was even larger than he was on the field.
Only one chief clown, one chief hero, one chief everything in the game. George Herman Ruth.
He captured the imagination of baseball fans, of non-baseball fans throughout the world.
In Japan, it was all Babe Ruth. Thousands of Japanese fans followed Ruth everywhere. It was all Babe Ruth, Babe Ruth, Babe Ruth.
The adoration was sincere. And it's not too much to say that Babe Ruth always responded so warmly.
There's been so many lovely things said about me, and I'm glad that I've had the opportunity to thank everybody.
In return, baseball fans thanked the Babe and acknowledged his accomplishments by making him a unanimous selection to the prestigious All-Century team.
He began his career as one of the game's best pitchers, ended up 714 home runs later as an American legend, George Herman Babe
more than gratified and pleased that people still think of him as being such a great baseball player. There's hardly a day goes by that his name is not mentioned. In some ways, he's bigger now than he was when he was playing baseball.
I think Babe Ruth's the most famous athlete of the 20th century, and certainly the most famous player of all time.
His celebrity, his star athletic ability has transcended, and he has become an American icon.
The greatest public figure in the history of American sports.
Coming up next on Yankeeography.
When people talk about Ruth having been a pitcher and then turning into an outfielder, that damns Ruth with faint praise.
The legend of Babe Ruth was born in Baltimore in 1895 in a building that now houses the Babe Ruth Museum. Young Babe proved quite a handful for his modest, tavern-owning parents who fought to keep him under control.
As Babe got to the point where he could get out in the streets a little bit, he was unattended. Not because his parents didn't love him, but they were busy.
Babe Ruth as a kid was the same personality as Babe Ruth when he was a grown man. He was having a good time.
He was a good boy in a way, but he didn't like to go to school, and he didn't like to do a lot of things that was asked for him to do.
In an effort to both discipline and educate the Babe, his parents sent him to St. Mary's Industrial School for Boys in hopes he would someday become a shirt maker.
In this institution, St. Mary's Industrial School for Boys in Baltimore, George Herman Ruth was brought up. It can be fairly said that he was not considered a promising boy.
In the beginning, I think he went back and forth. He did have times when he went back home, but then he always came back here. After a while, though, and for the majority of his time, he just stayed here. We're standing on Babe Ruth Field. This is the field where he actually learned to play baseball. When the Babe was here, a Zavarian brother named Brother Matthias recognized the innate ability that he obviously had to play baseball and taught him the game.
There were about 600 children attending St. Mary's, give or take, at any time. And Babe was one of the bigger guys. He became a celebrity among the children.
He had, as far as anybody can make out, a good time at St. Mary's. For one thing, it brought out his athletic talent.
He was the star catcher and pitcher at St. Mary's, which fielded competitive teams that would go out and play high schools and other neighborhoods. These games would attract lots of people.
Baltimore Orioles owner Jack Dunn was one of those people and thought the Babe would make quite a pitcher for his minor league team. But there was a hitch.
In order to get out of St. Mary's Industrial School, you had to be 21 years old. Well, at the time he was 18, 19 years old when he was discovered by Jack Dunn. So Jack Dunn had to actually literally become his guardian. He had to sign papers saying, yes, I will be the guardian of Babe Ruth when he goes off to spring training.
The Baltimore newspapers picked up on this legal guardian thing and started calling George Herman Ruth Jack Dunn's baby. And that's where the nickname came from. I think before they ever left spring training, he was Babe Ruth.
The 19-year-old Ruth pitched well for Dunn, but his playing time in Baltimore would be short-lived.
Jack Dunn runs into financial difficulty that led to him selling off his top players to the Red Sox just so he could float payroll. And that's how Ruth goes off to the Red Sox.
Ruth arrived in Boston in 1914 as a highly touted pitching prospect. The Babe joined a Red Sox team that was on the verge of winning 3 of the next 5 World Series, and Ruth quickly established himself as one of the game's best.
As a pitcher with the Red Sox, He won more games before the age of 23 than any other pitcher in the Hall of Fame except Bob Feller.
In his first 5 full seasons, he was a pitcher, and in 2 of those years, he was a 20-game winner. He averaged 18 victories a season in those 5 years, and made 3 World Series starts, won all 3 games, and in doing so, set a record for the most consecutive scoreless innings.
It was a mark that would stand for nearly 50 years. During his time, he was even compared to another legendary pitcher of that era.
In the 1916 and 17 seasons combined, Ruth had a pitching record of 47 wins and 25 losses. Walter Johnson, over those same 2 years, had a record of 48 wins and 36 losses. Ruth's ERA in that 2-year period was 1.88. Johnson's was 2.04. Had there been a Cy Young Award at the time, Ruth certainly would have won one of those, perhaps 2.
Babe's feats on the mound have been lost in the legend of Babe, the home run hitter. But your first love is forever, and Babe loved to pitch.
He was extremely proud of his pitching record. It's been said that he was the best left-handed pitcher in the league at the time, and could have established some real records in pitching if he had stayed with it.
In his career as a pitcher, Ruth went 94 and 46, a .671 winning percentage.
When people talk about Ruth having been a pitcher and then turning into an outfielder, that damns Ruth with faint praise. He was a spectacular pitcher.
Ruth won 94 games and lost 46 as a pitcher. Had he continued just as a pitcher, he would have made the Hall of Fame.
But Babe had still another calling ahead of him with his bat. We now return to Babe Ruth's Yankeeography. With Ruth on the mound, the Red Sox won 3 out of 4 World Series beginning in 1915. But Ruth knew that his mighty bat should be in the lineup every day, and the Red Sox soon agreed.
And it was in that environment that this star pitcher was gradually changed into an outfielder.
The Red Sox made the decision that they needed to have him play every day. He was just too valuable to the club.
It was in 1919 the Red Sox made Ruth an everyday outfielder, and he responded with a record 29 home runs. But that wasn't the year's big baseball story. 8 members of the Chicago White Sox were accused of consorting with gamblers to throw the 1919 World Series. Commissioner Kennesaw Mountain Landis banned them from Major League Baseball. The Black Sox scandal did enormous damage to the game.
After the Black Sox scandal, people got, a little down on baseball, say, well, it is a crooked game.
And that's when the baseball gods intervened, as Ruth was sold to the Yankees for $125,000 so the Red Sox owner could finance a Broadway play. Ironically, the game's biggest star was now on its biggest stage.
Perhaps the perfect contrast to move attention away from the Black Sox and back on the field and the wonderful things that could happen on a baseball diamond came this bigger-than-life player, Babe Ruth.
He came over from Boston. He started hitting those home runs, and the fans really loved Babe.
Ruth brought baseball back. Now people start liking baseball players again.
No one could match his power and consistency.
He hit more home runs in 1920 and 21 than any other team.
54 home runs in 1920, 59 in 1921. Totally unprecedented.
He was one of the very greatest hitters ever in a style that didn't exist before he showed that it could work. He uppercut the ball and hit these long, soaring, high-fly home runs at a time when it wasn't thought to be possible to do that consistently.
It was almost like he was sent from above. Baseball's savior. He walked the earth. He performed miracles.
He could do things that no one else in that era could do. He was fantastic.
Ruth was also the perfect leading man for the Roaring 20s. The Babe lived life to its fullest, and then some.
Babe came along at just the right time in American history and American culture.
Folks were just naturally drawn to his personality and his penchant for the dramatic.
If there ever was a time that I'm going to try to hit a home run, it's sure going to be today for you boys.
He was a guy that always loved to be on stage. Babe was that kind of a person. He had a lot of flair.
Ruth is the only player I know that when he came out on the field, everybody stopped. It was like the star came onto the center stage.
This star was so big, in fact, he single-handedly built a legendary new home for the Yankees.
You know, his popularity, because of his ability on the field, leads to the building of Yankee Stadium, which opens for the 1923 season. And, you know, Ruth hits a home run on opening day. And, I mean, think about that. Just, you know, has to be that way. Babe Ruth always came through in the big moments.
Like the 1923 World Series, when he hit .368 with 3 home runs, leading the Yankees to their first ever title. Unfortunately, big stars are sometimes also bad boys. Ruth was suspended numerous times by both Commissioner Landis and his manager Miller Huggins for, among other things, playing off-season baseball games for extra money, a practice known as barnstorming.
Babe didn't like to play by the rules, and this is one of the rules that maybe he broke, that, you know, that he would step outside of whatever the Yankees wanted him to do and barnstorm. Ruth felt in his heart that he was not beholding to the game, that the game was more beholding to him, and that's why he could get away with it.
There was also the matter of his weight. In 1925, he collapsed on a train in Baltimore and was rushed to the hospital, an incident called the bellyache heard round the world. Reports of his demise were premature, for in 1926 he led the Yankees to another pennant, helped in large part by a strapping new first baseman named Lou Gehrig.
Ruth hit third, Gehrig hit fourth. That was a bad crew to face.
They were such good hitters, strong hitters, and we had to be careful.
Ruth and Gehrig would make a dynamic duo for years to come, and their best was close at hand. Still to come on Yankeeography.
I've had thrills before, like hitting a home run in Chicago that time. The Lord was with me when I called the shot.
Throughout the 20s, Babe Ruth was the Yankee superstar, but soon he would share the spotlight with fellow slugger Lou Gehrig. Ruth and Gehrig formed the nucleus of a powerful team, one so dominant that one year it earned its own nickname.
This rare assemblage of talent was called Murderer's Row.
The Yankees in 1927 won 110 games. They had Gehrig and Ruth and Lazzeri and Musial and Combs. Those fellows all batted over 300 and hit for distance.
These Yankees brought championship honor and glory to Yankee Stadium and to all of New York.
The 27 team is considered maybe the greatest baseball team of all time, and Ruth sits right in the middle of it. He is the jewel in the middle of that Murderer's Row crown.
1927 witnessed Ruth's most amazing accomplishment as he sought to break his own home run record.
Previously, he had set the record of 59 home runs. People wondered if he could ever muscle up again to hit 60. At the end of the season, last game of the year, he hits number 60 and sets the record for all time.
The Bambino was crowned King of SWAT by manager Huggins.
1927, when he was supposedly after his prime, is when he hits his 60 home runs.
Simply put, the number 60 left baseball fans in awe. And though it's since been passed, Ruth is still today considered by many the home run king.
He's the first one that ever hit 60 home runs. I wondered what he'd hit today. Probably hit 100.
When Babe did that, it was so far beyond what other players were capable of. And despite the fact that you've got Sosa and McGuire and Bonds achieving what they have, I think baseball still looks back to '60 as the mark.
What a season it's been for the Babes. Ruth a long run to right field. It's gone. That's number 60 for the Babes.
By 1930, Babe Ruth was so big no one blinked an eye when he was rewarded with the largest sports contract ever.
Ruth is a contract called for $80,000 for 2 years. That's what we agreed upon. Will you kindly sign it? Yes, sir, Colonel.
When some people said, don't you feel guilty about making more money than Herbert Hoover, the President of the United States, Babe said, hell, I had a better year than he did, didn't I?
Babe Ruth personified America as well as any person has ever personified a culture or its citizens. Ruth, as he said, he was bigger than the president. That's why he got paid more money.
In 1932, Ruth's 6-year reign as home run king was snapped by Jimmy Fox of the Philadelphia A's. But Babe found comfort in the Yankees once again reaching the World Series, the Babe's 10th.
I think I'm a pretty fortunate fella to get in my 10th World Series. I think that's going to be a record to stand for a long time.
The 32 World Series came in the twilight of Babe's career, but he was still capable of memorable moments, like his alleged called shot in that series. It may have happened, it may have not. Here's Babe.
But I will say that I've had thrills before. Something like hitting a home run in Chicago that time. The Lord was with me when I called the shots.
The called shot home run in Game 3 of the 1932 World Series. The Yanks are playing the Cubs. There's bad blood between the two teams. That resulted in a lot of bench jockeying, primarily from the Cubs side, directed at Babe Ruth.
Both clubs riding each other, doing everything to get each other's goat. Well, at this one particular time when I went to bed, Charlie Ruth was pitching. And the first pitch ball was a called strike. Well, I thought it was outside and didn't like it very much. So the boys over there would give me this, on you. Well, the second pitch ball was another called strike. Well, I didn't like that one either, so I let it go by. Well, I stepped out of the box, and by that time they were over there going crazy. Well, I looked out at center field and I poured it. I said, I'm going to hit the next pitch ball right past the flagpole. Well, the good Lord must have been with him.
As he rounds the bases, he gestures again to the Cubs, pushing at them with both hands as to say, don't ever challenge me again like this, because I'm Babe Ruth and I can do what I want. And so he did.
Whether it's a true story or apocryphal, it lives on today as a part of baseball lore.
I don't believe it.
I believe it did happen.
I will go to my grave not knowing for sure, but frankly not giving a damn. I'm glad the legend exists. That I am sure of.
Welcome back to Yankeeography. As you've just seen, Babe Ruth did indeed have an almost mythical quality about him. In fact, for a time, there probably wasn't a bigger name in the world. Like Muhammad Ali and Michael Jordan, who followed him, Babe Ruth was more than the undisputed champion of his sport. He was also the original king of all media.
Babe reached the Yankees in 1920. That's the same year that we first see tabloid newspapers. It's a key year in the development of the newsreel. It's a key year in the development of radio. So there is Babe Ruth just poised on the brink of major stardom at a time when we have the media that's able to generate that type of stardom. And Babe never disappointed.
The meshing of Ruth and the media was a marriage made in heaven. Writers and photographers snapped of his life both on and off the field, even though we never remembered their names.
Ruth was famous of never knowing anybody's name. Ruth's greeting to everybody was, "Hiya, kid," whether it was the President of the United States or a kid in a barbershop. John Drebinger said, "I was the only one that Ruth ever called by his first name. He called me Joe."
Well, there was one writer whose name Ruth did remember. Christy Walsh left the newspaper business to become Babe's publicity manager, and he realized early on that Ruth was a most versatile showman. The Babe did endorsements, vaudeville, radio shows. He even did movies. Babe's first film was Heading Home, and in it, he played a ball player.
The movies beckoned, and he briefly became the rival of John Barrymore, Douglas Fairbanks, and Gloria Swanson.
Ruth truly enjoyed making movies, especially when the films featured children. Fact is, there are about as many images of Ruth talking to kids as there are of his home runs.
Watch for me next week now, and I'll teach you more about baseball. Goodbye.
Babe Ruth was the Pied Piper of baseball. Certainly the most beloved player, maybe to play any sport in this country. And it is because of his genuine love and affection for children.
Kids were drawn to him almost as if by magic.
He enjoyed the company of kids more than adults. He had, you could call it a way, I think it was a lot more than that.
Now watch. Fastball, curveball. Fastball, curveball. Fastball, curveball.
I think they realized that in his heart, he was kind of like a big kid.
Ruth never let the spirit of youth leave his heart, and he never let a child in need leave his sight without first trying to make a difference.
I know that often he'd get some request to come into Yankee Stadium from some kid that was sick or ill or in the hospital. And he would take the time to go and visit and offer some encouragement to him.
Now, the best and largest smile, I'm going to give this autographed ball to. So we'll let you cut the pie first. Adieu. That's not funny. Oh, look at that guy.
We found and interviewed lots of people who had met Babe Ruth or in some way been touched by him when they were kids. And to a person, they said he was just an incredible influence on them, the best thing that ever happened to their childhood.
I wish every kid could have Babe Ruth for a father.
Next on Yankeeography.
Daddy loved music. Once in a while, I'd play the piano, and he'd try and sing. Believe me, that was one thing that he couldn't do.
Babe Ruth certainly had a unique bond with his fans, but he saved his very best for those who knew him best.
We were very close, very close. And no wrong could his sister do.
When he was established in New York with the Yankees, he would send her passes for games.
She used to love to go out and hang out with him. She said she had a great time when he would come home and visit here in Baltimore. She loved it. She loved the attention that her brother was getting.
It used to drive me nuts when they started applauding and hollering. I wasn't used to that, you know, but oh, they would just go mad.
Once he proved his worth on the baseball field, Ruth set out to find a stable family life, the kind that Babe never had as a kid.
Well, after his first year in professional baseball, he came back to Baltimore. He had met a waitress, Helen Woodford, in Boston. They became good buddies and developed a serious relationship.
Babe and Helen soon married and made a home for themselves in Sudbury, Massachusetts. When Dorothy arrived in 1921, their family was seemingly complete.
It started out good, as far as my understanding, and then I think the more popular Babe became, and the less he was probably around the household, I think Helen wasn't as used to it.
It was a rocky road and something that must have frustrated his wife incredibly. Helen died in 1929. Their relationship had been strained beyond repair well before then. And during that time, Babe had met in New York a woman by the name of Claire Hodgson, and they became friends, and after Helen's death, they married.
Once again, Babe was faced with the challenge of making family a priority. Both he and Claire adopted each other's child, so now he had a stepdaughter in Julia and a daughter in Dorothy. But this time, Babe had help, for Claire had a better sense of how to run the family of a baseball superstar.
After he married the second time, we saw very little of him because I guess he had to stay close quarters.
Claire kind of got the Babe straightened out a little bit. She kind of clamped down on him and recognizing who she had married, that this was this big dynamo.
I think she handled the money a little bit more than his first wife. I think she was more concerned with that, concerned with after his career was over with, and seemed to be present a little bit more at the ball games. And even the off season seemed like they did a lot more together.
I'm going down St. Pete now to try to get in trim for a good season. And I hope I can come through and satisfy all the fans.
It was obvious to everyone that Ruth was the kind of father who loved to have fun with his family. But what might surprise people is that Babe was also quite the disciplinarian.
He was probably a stricter father than a lot of others were. Even after I had graduated from high school and I was dating, I had to be home every night by midnight.
And you're going to pay attention to what the teacher tells you?
Yes, Daddy.
Well, if you don't, you see that big hand.
Ruth made certain that his daughters experienced the kind of family life he never had as a child, something pictures of the most photographed father of his time vividly captured. And his ace in the hole was Claire, who always did her best to keep him in check.
He was only on skis either once or twice when we were in Switzerland. And Mother said, "Don't you realize that you could break a leg? You'd never play baseball again." Mother was always looking out for him.
They loved being together with the family in an apartment up in New York and playing the piano.
Daddy loved music. Once in a while, I'd play the piano, and he'd try and sing. Believe me, that was one thing that he couldn't do.
Play ball! Strike one! Strike two! Foul ball!
He was more than just a baseball player. He was a great family man. I always had a marvelous time with Daddy, no matter what we did, whether we were going to a football game, a hockey game, anything. It was always fun with Daddy.
He lived 3 lifetimes in one. He was just a fabulous, fantastic individual. And I'm sorry that I didn't have more time to be with him.
He was a nice, wonderful person to know and for me to have as a brother.
And I couldn't imagine having a father that would have been any better than he was.
Still to come.
Babe always felt that he might be the next manager of the Yankees. He was a man that couldn't even handle himself. How could he handle 30 other ball players?
I can't go on forever. Somebody's got to take my shoes and take my place. But you can bet your sweet life that I won't play until I drop. But I'll play until I damn near drop. Thank you.
Comiskey Park in Chicago was the site for the first Major League Baseball All-Star Game in 1933. And it was only fitting that the biggest star of them all would hit the first ever All-Star home run.
It's a home run in the right field stand. First home run of the series.
Ruth was as popular as ever, and though time was taking its toll, he reached some amazing milestones, hitting his 500th, 600th, and 700th home runs. As his career wound to a close, Ruth made clear his dream to move up to the next level.
Babe always felt that he might be the next manager of the Yankees. And of course, in hindsight, you figure he was a man that couldn't even handle himself. How could he handle 30 other ball players?
Ruth held out hope that the Yankees would dismiss Joe McCarthy and name him manager, but the team was quite happy with McCarthy. So at the end of the 34 season, Babe left the field as a Yankee for the final time. Then, during the offseason, Ruth received an offer from Boston Braves owner Judge Emil Fuchs, one he felt would fulfill his dream.
I now, Babe, give you your unconditional release, and now the 3 men of the league.
Boys, Judge Fuchs, I'm going over to the Braves on one condition, and Colonel will back those conditions up. that when I'll be with your ball club, you know that you're getting the very best that's in me, and I'll be on the field every moment I can, working hard for you, just like I did with the Yankees and the old Boston Red Sox.
Judge Fuchs gave him to believe that he would be the assistant manager and that he could look forward to managing the Braves. And that was the only reason that Daddy signed on with him.
But Ruth soon discovered that Fuchs had no intention of promoting him to manager. He was hired simply to put fans in the stands. And what they saw was not Babe at his best.
And he really was out of shape, over the hill, washed up, not doing well, not playing every day, aches and pains. But he goes in to Pittsburgh and in May, and he hit 3 home runs in one game. One of them was the longest home run ever hit at Forbes Field.
Ruth's third home run was number 714, his final home run, and his final major league hit.
I think Babe, over the years after his career as a player, was devastated that he was never named to manage in the major leagues. Not only did the Yankees reject his services as a manager, everybody did.
Briefly, the Babe coached first base for the Dodgers.
Funny, everybody's been asking me what I think about coming to Brooklyn. I want to say one thing, and I'm proud to be with Brooklyn, and the wonderful fans they got over there.
Babe wanted it so badly, he was taken advantage of by the game and by those franchises that hired him. So I think about that, and I don't think it's a good chapter in Babe Ruth's life.
This did little to diminish the Babe's legacy, as he was part of the first class of Hall of Fame players inducted at Cooperstown. The ceremony reminded everyone just how amazing his 22-year career really was.
You know, to me, this is just like an anniversary myself, because 25 years ago yesterday, I pitched my first baseball game in Boston for the Boston Red Sox. So it seems like an anniversary for me, too, and I'm surely glad, and it's a pleasure for me to come up here and be picked also on the Hall of Fame. Thank you.
In retirement, Ruth continued to promote the game and did his part to help raise money for the war effort. In 1946, however, he began to complain of pain over his left eye and was soon diagnosed with cancer. His family and doctors kept the diagnosis a secret from the Babe.
He did not know. He kept asking, "What's the matter with me? Why can't they find out what's the matter with me and get me well again?" They never came right out and said, "Look, you've got cancer, and it's in an inoperable spot. We can't do anything about it."
April 27, 1947, was declared Babe Ruth Day throughout the major leagues. Of course, the most poignant ceremony was at Yankee Stadium.
Looking down at Daddy and seeing him looking so frail and so sick, I was on the verge of tears.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. You know how bad my voice sounds. Well, it feels just as bad.
He was so uncomfortable and in such pain, but all the people had come out, and he wanted to thank them.
And I'm glad that I've had the opportunity to thank everyone.
The following year, at the 25th anniversary celebration of the 1923 team, Ruth took the field at Yankee Stadium one last time. Leaning on a bat he borrowed from Bob Feller, Ruth looked out upon the very house he built, and then he said goodbye. 2 months later, at the age of just 53, Babe Ruth was dead.
The nation just mourned. It was almost like a president dying. His body laying at rest at Yankee Stadium, which is unheard of, you know. And people waited for hours to go through and just get a small glimpse of him.
His service at St. Patrick's Cathedral brought thousands more out into the rain to say thank you one last time.
I remember as I came out of the church, I looked, and all you could see on both sides of Fifth Avenue were people. I remember thinking, all these people standing out there in the rain, almost saying, goodbye.
We now return to Babe Ruth's Yankeeography. With Ruth's passing, the baseball world looked back at the enormity of his impact on the game.
The greatest idol in American sports, Babe Ruth, made the turnstile spin in Major League ballparks and here in the house that Ruth built.
They don't name stadiums for players, but it should have been indeed the house that Ruth built.
From his first home run at Yankee Stadium, Ruth instilled a spirit, one that would be passed along to the generations that followed.
The New York Ball Club acknowledged its debt to the Babe by retiring his famous number for all time. No other Yankee would ever again wear Ruth's number 3.
A few years back when they retired Jackie Robinson's uniform throughout baseball, I thought that was a great tribute. And I feel the same way about Babe Ruth. I feel that they should retire number 3 all the way around because Babe Ruth is baseball.
Until then, the game's greatest hero will forever be honored in Yankee Stadium's Monument Park, where today's Yankees continue to pay their respect.
I keep his forehead shiny out there. I take my sweat after I warm up and I rub it for good luck. You know, take a little luck with me to the mound, and so far it's been paying off.
That cap was a cap of Babe Ruth in 1933.
Baseball was my first love. I always did it. At school, I did all my reports on Babe Ruth, how he saved the game of baseball, and I just thought that was pretty killer for one man to do so much for so many people.
Yes, Babe Ruth became a legend. 12 years he led the league in homers. 4 times he hit 54 or more in a season. And over the span of his career, the Babe broke or equaled 54 Major League batting records.
Incredibly, Ruth still holds the all-time slugging average of .690, and it wasn't until 2001 that his single-season records for slugging average and walks were eclipsed by Barry Bonds.
Bonds walks for the 171st time, a record set by the Babe 78 years ago.
And that wasn't all.
Outside ball 4, that's 2,063, a new standard. All-time base on balls. It goes by Ruth.
Records will always be broken, but that first guy who did it and the first guy that changed sports, that's the guy that's going to be remembered.
And that's why when Ruth's record of 60 home runs in a season was finally broken, the aura of the Babe really never went away.
Roger Maris, 61. There it is, a long drive deep to right field.
As soon as he was gone, Mrs. Ruth had tears coming down. And Raj said, Mrs. Ruth, don't feel badly. Nobody will replace the Babe.
The spirit of Ruth even followed Mark McGwire in 1998.
Wake up, Babe Ruth. There's company coming. It's Mark McGwire.
You said it was unbelievable to be in the same sentence as Babe Ruth, but for our generation, you are Babe Ruth.
Well, thank you.
There are the Mark McGwires, which is phenomenal, but it's still Babe Ruth. I mean, the measuring stick will always be in baseball. What is Babe Ruth?
It has been said that what one does in life echoes for an eternity. There is no better example than Babe Ruth.
He was so big here, and I mean, this guy played back years and years and years ago, but his name today is just as big as it was back then, and that means you did something right.
I just hope that fathers will keep on telling their sons, once upon a time, there was a baseball player named Babe Ruth. And he was a great baseball player and a great guy.
Babe Ruth has been dead now for more than 5 decades, yet his name still comes up in everyday conversation. The Babe is part of our lexicon. He's embedded in our culture, a symbol of Americana. There are few men in the history of mankind who carry that kind of weight. You'd certainly be hard-pressed to find another athlete who even comes close.
Some have been here long before my time. They got on it, and I worked hard, and I got on it. And I hope that the coming generation, the young boys today, that they'll work hard and also be on it. And as my old friend Cy Young says, I hope it goes another 100 years, and the next 100 years will be the greatest. You know, to me, this is just like an anniversary myself, because 25 years ago yesterday, I pitched my first baseball game in Boston for the Boston Red Sox. So it seems like an anniversary for me, too, and I'm surely glad, and it's a pleasure for me to come up here and be picked also on the Hall of Fame. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. You know how bad my voice sounds. Well, it feels just as bad. You know this baseball game of ours comes up from you. That means the boys. And after you're a boy and grow up to know how to play ball, then you come to the boys you see representing themselves today in your national pastime. The only real game, I think, in the world, baseball. Many lovely things said about me, and I'm glad that I've had the opportunity to thank everybody. Thank you.
You ought to do about 5 miles a day, I think, to start it. All right. Get those knives and legs of yours in good shape. All right. I think that's enough of that. Let's take a walk. Hey, listen, I'm not going to ride to St. Petersburg. Always got to take your legs and get those in good shape. All right. So what's the idea of those boxes? Why, keep in good shape before you get them riding with a pitcher. Oh, that's so, huh? Say, Paul. Who the heck are you chanting? Max Valley. Say, what's the idea? Well, it's a great idea, babe. So what is the idea? Remember how you socked me inside there for the movie? Say, let me get out of here. Turn on more steam there. Hey, never mind the steam. I'll turn the steam on. I'll get steam when I get out of here. I think we'd call that a day. I'll cover you up and I'll make you sweat. I think I'll take a snooze on top of it. Say, Artie. Yeah? You want to do me a favor? I'd love to. Well, go away from here and let me sleep. All right. That goes for you camera fellas, too. Family and I arrived here yesterday about 5 o'clock. And it looks like I'm going to play a little golf this morning. That is when you fellas get finished here. And it seems very nice to get back to Florida again. They were telling me about the bad weather they had down here, but today it seems to me that it's very good. And someone was asking me about how I was going to get along with Joe McCarthy. Well, Joe and I think, are going to get along very nicely. Joe's a very nice boy, and I think he and I are going to get together. And as far as the ball club is concerned, I think our ball club is in very good shape. If we get a little better pitching than we got last year, I think the race is going to be more tight, and I think it's the best thing for the ball clubs and best thing for the fans also. I think I'm looking forward to a wonderful year in baseball, and I hope the fans feel the same towards us.
This is the 12th year that the All-America Board of Baseball has selected a team of which Babe Ruth is chairman of the board. I'm going to ask my friend Babe now to present these certificates to the All-America players who are participating in the World Series. Babe?
Dizzy Dean, they tell me that you're dizzy, but if I could throw a ball like you, I'd like to be as dizzy as you are. This is for your All-American. Pleasure to pick you on the team.
Thank you. There's for second baseman.
Mr. Geringer, it's a pleasure to pick you on the team, and I'll live a long time before I'll see another second baseman like you.
Now, we gave the certificate to Mickey a while ago, Mickey Cochran, the great catcher of the Detroit team. And here's another one, an old friend of yours.
Well, Al Simmons, pleasure also to pick you on the team, and I hope you're on the team quite a lot.
Thanks a lot, Dave.
They say you never start living until after you're 40, so it looks like I'm on my way. I'm going to sure try to do my best this coming year as a 40-year-old ball player and see if it can be a successful one. It may be my last, it may not, but I'll do my best. Thank you.
Baseball, and I hope you hit more runs this year than you ever did.
Thanks very much, Robert. Well, they tell me as a rule here they don't open the season in Boston. It's usually too cold. It's very cold today, but I think it'll probably warm up a little bit later. But they tell me this is fine weather for Boston this time of the year. And if we don't win, I know we're going to give a lot of... You think so, kid?
And I think cold. New York is lucky to open it that with this weather.
Great. Thanks a lot, boy. Everybody's been asking me what I think about coming to Brooklyn. I want to say one thing, and I'm proud to be with Brooklyn. And the wonderful fans they got over there. Now and then they'll give you the berries, but you got to let it sink in and forget it. I want to say once again, I'm very, very glad to be in Brooklyn.
Babe, I'm glad to see you back in the National League, and because it's going to help all the club owners, in my opinion, and it's too bad that you're not up there swinging the old apple again, because after what I've seen in the National League this year, well, I'm sure that you could do a lot better than some of them up there swinging.
Well, thanks, Diz, and I hope your arm comes around. And when it does, I'll be up there and knock one right off you. Thanks, Dave.
You see, in my day, the two clubhouses right across from each other. And they had to go through our dugout to go to first base. And I'll tell you something, he's the only person, now listen to what I say, when he walked across that field, everybody stood up, hey, there's the Babe, clapped like crazy for him. The only man. So, 1,000 years from now, they'll still be talking him, Babe Ruth.
Well, Babe was a very, very colorful person, you know. And he had a lot of flair. And, of course, he really brought the home runs into the game. And that's what the fans loved. And that's what made him so popular. That he lived up to it every minute because he was a guy that always dressed very well, you know, and had a big cigar in his mouth, and he loved to be on stage. Babe was that kind of a person. And, of course, there's a lot of stories about Babe. I don't know whether I told you about the first time I pitched to him. 1933, Bucky Harris was our manager. And the first trip into New York, first time I'd ever been in New York City, and certainly the first time I'd ever been in Yankee Stadium. And Bucky had me in the bullpen in left field, way out in left field, about 1.5 miles in left field. And at that time, it seemed that way when you started to make the walk. But we had a pitcher named Carl Fisher that started the ball game, and he got into about the third inning. Got into trouble, so Bucky called the bullpen, called me in. And I was loosening up on the mound, and like I say, I was underhand pitcher. And so the first batter I faced in Yankee Stadium was Babe Ruth. And I threw 4 pitches to him and struck him out. And then I got Gehrig out following him. And then the next inning, I come out to start the next inning. And Art Fletcher was the third base coach. And he was noted in those days as one of the big jockeys in the game, you know, that always got on the rookies and was always in the midst of everything. And so I walked out to warm up. And Fletcher said, hey, Bush, look over here. I want to tell you something. And I didn't pay attention to him. He said, you hear me, Bush? He says, come over here. I want to tell you something. Look over here. Of course, I wouldn't look. And finally, he says, you've got the BAM all upset. He said he came back to the bench after you struck him out. And he said he'd been struck out a lot of times, but the first time a damn woman ever struck him out. Of course, with me and my big ears, I heard every word of it. At that time, I didn't think it very funny. Years later,
well, it was just a couple of winters later. I played golf with Babe in Florida. We had a group, Dizzy Dean and Babe and Paul Wayne and Wes Farrell, Mickey Cochran, a group of us used to have a group that played in the wintertime. I was in Lakeland. And so the first winter I was down there, I told Babe about this, and he laughed, and he thought he said, that sounds like Fletcher. And then years later, when I was retired, and about, I'd say almost a year, 9 months, I guess, before Babe died, he came to Detroit. The Ford Motor Company had hired him as their official representative for American Legion Baseball. All Ford dealers all over the country sponsored American Legion Baseball. Mr. Ford was a great fan of American Legion. And Babe came to Detroit. Charlie Gehringer and myself were selected to manage the two top American Legion teams to play for the playoff. And so Babe came to town, and we had several interviews on the television. On radio, no television on that. And I brought that up once again to Babe. And Babe was sick then at that time. He couldn't hardly talk on his throat. But when I told him that story again, he says, God, he says, that sounds like Fletcher again. He said, I remember that incident when we talked about this in Florida that time. And Babe got a big kick out of that, but Fletcher got more of a kick out of it than anything. Of course, that's something I'll never remember because I didn't think it very funny.
He was a great practical joker. One time he got a young fella, Ed Wells, that come over to the pitcher, had come over to the Yankees from Detroit, and the Babe pulled a little scam on him. He persuaded Ed reluctantly. Ed was reluctant to go with him because he had a date with a couple of dames out on the outskirts of Detroit. So he persuaded Ed to go buy a fifth of gin and he'd get a dozen oranges. So in the way out in the taxi cab, Babe held the oranges and Ed got the gin. But before he went up to this house where the girls lived, they switched. He gave Ed the oranges and he took the gin. So when he knocked on the door, instead of a young, attractive lady coming to the door, it was a great big gruesome looking man. And he said, you're the scum that's been after my wife. And he reached into his hip pocket and he pulled out a gun, and Babe hollers, run, Ed, run for your life. And he runs through a screen door, and the guy with the gun goes bang, bang, bang. And Ed could feel it was actually wadding, hit him in the back, and he ran and took the wrong turn and ran into a big board protecting the street, and he knocked himself down and came running back. And it was about midnight by the time he got back to the Book Cadillac Hotel, and the Yankees were all around sitting in the lobby with long faces and said, Babe is dying, he's up in his room, he keeps asking for you, wondering what happened to you. So they all go up to the room, and they got Babe stretched out on a bed with ketchup all over his shirt and talcum powder all over his face. And Harold Combs says, Babe's dying. And Ed Wells just, and faded away. That scam's been pulled on a number of ball players.
He didn't remember meeting me when I was 4 or 5 years old for sure. But when he came to Yankee Stadium, he had already retired. And this is in the 40s, early 40s and 40, well, he died in 48, as I recall. But he would borrow, he come in and asked me if he could borrow my glove. I was left-handed also. And I remember him coming into the clubhouse there, and we had a clubhouse man named Pete Sheehy. And he obviously he said, go over there and talk to Tommy Byrne. He's got some gloves there in his locker. But he said, "You're the Baltimore Babe," or something to that effect. You know, he remembered where I was from over the general news of baseball, I guess, and he was from Baltimore, and he called me he called everybody Babe, but he called me the Baltimore Babe. He said, "Can I borrow your pud here, or one of your gloves?" And I said, "You can have every damn thing in the locker." In the locker, because he put us in those lockers, if you know what I'm talking about.